everybody. It is Thursday, 23rd of June. Time for number 152, I think. If I don't know the date, I don't know what number I'm doing. So this one, Rebel Yell, which was donated by the fantastic Andrew P. Butler. Now, Rebel Yell, there is actually a couple of versions of Rebel Yell, and I've been getting a little bit confused as to which one this actually is. Rebel Yell is a brand, it's actually owned by a company called Lux Co. But there is a Rebel Yell Bourbon, which is made by Heaven Hill. It's a Kentucky straight bourbon, which is produced by Heaven Hill on behalf of Lux Co. There is also a straight rye, but this particular one is a relatively new one actually, and it's the Rebel Yell American Whiskey. And this is actually a combination of, and it says, I'll put what the bottle looks like, but Andrew's actually done a little sort of like copied the label and printed it off to stick on there, and it says on this bit as well, a blend of bourbon and rye whiskey. And this is actually a combination, it's a 50-50 split of 2-year-old bourbon from Heaven Hill and 2-year-old rye from the MGP distillery in Lawrenceburg in Indiana, which we've covered a few times before during this run of American whiskey. So the brand itself, as in Rebel Yell, was actually created in 1949 by a guy called Charles Farnsley, who was actually previous mayor of Louisville in Kentucky, and it was created to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the William LaRue Weller Company that was formed obviously 100 years earlier. Now at the time, in 1910, the distillery itself combined with the Stitzel distillery, and it was known as the Stitzel Weller Distillery at the time of 1949 when Rebel Yell was basically created. Now Stitzel Weller we have touched upon before when we did the Van Winkle. So Stitzel Weller were making the Van Winkle, Pappy Van Winkle, Old Rip Van Winkle stocks until Buffalo Trace took that over. So it's all these things kind of intertwine. So like I say, this particular one, I suppose you could, I'm trying to do the standard versions. Is the standard version the standard Rebel Yell bourbon? I don't know. My guess is that this is actually like the standard version because this would be the cheaper. Rather, it should be cheaper than the standard, than the straight bourbon will be. You're looking at about $30 for this. I don't think you can find it in the UK, but I think you can find one of the Rebel Yells in the UK, but I don't think it's this one. I don't know. I haven't delved too much into it anyway. Rebel Yell actually, like a lot of like the websites and things like that are touching upon Billy Idol, and she says more, blah, blah, blah. But it's actually named after a Confederate war cry. So the rye itself, the rye whiskey is 95% rye, 5% barley. In terms of the constitution of the bourbon, don't know. But it's, we're looking at quite a high rye content because there's going to be probably rye content in the bourbon, and then half of it is 95% rye. I can't do math very well, so you figure it out in terms of what the percentage of rye is in this. So it's 45, 90 proof. And like I say, 2 quite young whiskies as well. So it's you would kind of expect, knowing that, you would expect it to be pretty spicy and possibly quite harsh as well. And it's really quite citrusy on the nose. It's kind of lemon and lime on the nose there. There is that high rye content, and it's got the fire, 45% as well. And it does have a little bit of an alcoholic burn, a spiritiness to it, but it's not too overpowering. You can still get some of the graininess in there, but there is a definite kind of citrus, and it's lemon and lime on there as well. There is a definite acidity to it. Took a bit too much of a breath on that one, and it's really kind of got the back of my nose. Now, a decent mouthfeel on that actually. Surprisingly well rounded for something that is relatively young. Quite a nice, rich, rounded mouthfeel to it. There's not a huge amount on the palate, but it's not as harsh and as edgy as it is on the nose as it is on the palate. The citrusy vibe, kind of almost like a key lime pie, does actually come through a bit. Yeah, key lime pie is kind of what I'm getting in terms of the citrus of the lime, that kind of like custard filling that you get with it, which is that kind of rich mouthfeel that's there, and then a biscuity undertone as well. Actually, key lime pie is not too far off. Now, I like key lime pie, so I don't have any problems with that whatsoever. It's a pretty good sipping whiskey, to be honest. I am surprised. I think for $30, that's actually a pretty good price. Probably in the UK about 35 quid. It does seem to be the rough rule of thumb, is that if you can find the American whiskey or bourbon or whatever in the UK, take what it is in dollars and add about a fiver on it. And the more expensive it becomes, then add 10, 20, 50, that sort of thing. But this is actually pretty good. I'm surprised. I'm liking the key lime pie element to it, but it's nowhere near as I was expecting it to be. A little bit rougher around the edges, and it's not. There's a little bit of heat there, and there's a little bit of spiciness to it, but it's actually pleasant. It's more subdued than I thought it was going to be. It's got a good bite to it as well. It'd be great for bourbon drinkers. Bourbon drinkers aren't. I don't think they're not particularly precious. I don't think a majority of bourbon drinkers are particularly precious about rye, but sometimes people will go, well, I don't like rye whiskies, but I do like bourbons because I prefer them smoother and richer. And yes, this is probably a little bit spicier than those type of drinkers would like. But to be honest, and I'd probably put myself in that camp. But to be honest, I think the balance of this is actually pretty bang on. Like I say, for $30, I think that's actually a really good price. I'd be interested to see what the straight bourbon and the rye are like independently. But if they're anything like this, I'm willing to bet they're pretty decent, because that is pretty well balanced, nice citrusy element to it, which is just makes it stand out a little bit. It's almost like the bourbon is giving you that rich mouthfeel, and the rye is giving you just that kick and that zing, and it's a really good combination. Yeah, recommend that one. That's actually quite a lot better than I thought it was going to be. I've read in a few places, sort of Rebel Yell as a brand, I see, tends to get kind of like thrown in with the cheap end and the nasty side. No, not the nasty side, but the kind of rougher, cheaper, ooh, it's not that great, I'd rather be having sort of a proper bourbon and all that lot. But to be honest, I think that's actually really pleasant. I'm pleasantly surprised by how pleasant that is. Good stuff. Right, gonna crack on with the next one, so I'll do a quick rinse out and I'll see you then. Cheers.